There are two pieces of context you need to understand this story. Bear with me. Number one, I've had severe insomnia since I was a kid, and growing up, I was consistently awake until the early morning. Number two, the second floor of my house at the time was one room. My bed was in a corner, separated from the rest of the room by bookshelves and a wardrobe, but they didn't reach the ceiling, and there was no door, so I could see and hear anything happening on the second floor. The upstairs room had a door to the outside that was connected to a nearby hill by a poorly constructed bridge, made of 3 long, unsecured boards. The door had bells tied to it, because when I did sleep, I would sleepwalk. This happened when I was around 11. I lived in a very rural area in the house I described. One night when my parents were asleep, sometime in the early AM, I heard an aggressive rattling from the outside door. Really aggressive rattling and bells ringing. I have no idea how my parents didn't wake up. From the sound of it, it was definitely human, not an animal. I don't think they were trying to pick the lock. It sounded like they had the doorknob in their hands, and they were just shaking the door as hard as they possibly could. Trying to brute force it, I guess. Mind you, they're standing on a few wobbling planks of wood around 10 feet off the ground, which was cement, so kicking the door down wasn't exactly a viable option here. They shook the door for several minutes, then took a pause before trying again. They did this repeatedly. As soon as I'd begin thinking they'd left, the rattling would start again. They couldn't get in because the upstairs door was always locked due to it being unsafe and all, but the downstairs door to the house was always unlocked. We lived a considerable drive from the nearest house, and the road was barely usable anyway, so we just didn't think we needed to lock it. Ironically, all this person had to do was try the front door. It happened a second time several weeks later. The exact same pattern. Shake the doorknob, stop, shake again. They still didn't try the front door. After that, they never tried it again, as far as I'm aware, despite me going to bed every night expecting them, which is honestly the best ending one can hope for, given the circumstances. Now, I live a 9-hour drive from that house, and life has gone on. It does feel kind of weird that I have no idea who did it, and that I could meet them without even realizing. Maybe I already have. As far as scariest moments of my life go, this makes the top 10. It was that paralyzing fear where you can't move or scream. I couldn't alert my parents. I couldn't do anything. If they'd gotten inside, I probably wouldn't even run. To this day, I have nightmares where something bad happens, and I can't scream. My parents still think I'm lying about all this. After talking with my brother, I found out that he was woken up that night, and he heard it too. His bed was closer to the door, so he could probably hear it better than me. Despite not having many people, the area I'm from has a high murder and disappearance rate. There was a murder the year this happened that took place on the road I live on. Maybe the guy they booked for that is my mystery culprit. I don't know. I've had only one paranormal experience in my life, and it was when I was in 8th grade. My father was in the military, and he's now retired, and since it was just him and I in the home, when he went on deployment, I either had to go live with my mother or move to Indiana to go live with my grandparents. I chose my grandparents. So the first few months living with them were pretty normal. I got closer with my grandma, and she decided to tell me this story about how she used to be a tutor, for English I think, and she taught this little girl who was diagnosed with leukemia at a young age, and the doctors said she wouldn't make it past the 1st grade. But through perseverance, she made it halfway through the 3rd grade, before she unfortunately passed. Throughout this time, my grandma was there from kindergarten to 3rd grade, helping her work. sometimes even visiting her during doctor appointments to cheer her up. When she passed, she gave my grandma a bracelet of hers to keep, and I don't know if you guys believe that important stuff from someone could carry their spirit, but this made me believe it 100%. So during my summertime after 8th grade, I was still in Indiana, and I'd stay up late playing Sea of Thieves with my friends, and I'd get hungry, and so I would sneak to the kitchen and make myself a sandwich or two. But on the way back, I had to go through the single hallway in the house that had the bathroom and the entrances to all 3 bedrooms in the house. You know how when you run into someone while walking, you stop and kind of lean back a bit to prevent hitting them? Well, when I started walking down the hallway, I get about halfway through, and bam, I felt like I just ran straight into someone that felt about up to my chest, and I fell to the ground. I look up, and I see a girl in a pink puffy dress, but she's kind of opaque. She emanated this soft light, enough to where I could just see her, and it freaked me the fuck out. So I backed up a bit on the floor, and I bumped my head on a nightstand behind me. I blinked for just a second, and then she was gone. So I ran up to my room and locked the door. I couldn't really sleep after, so I stayed up just enough until I saw daylight, and then I passed out on my bed. I woke back up at around 2 p.m., and the first thing I did was tell my grandma about it. I described what the girl looked like, and my grandma started crying. She told me I described the girl that she used to tutor. I have no idea why she decided to show herself to me, but maybe she wanted to tell me something. My encounter with this individual, Ben, began in November 2024 in school. He was a friend of one of my friends, Tom, and eventually we became part of the same friend group. I've always found Ben a bit creepy, which seemed to be the school population's general view towards him. However, once we began regularly socializing, I began to feel bad for my presumptions. That was until we were added to a WhatsApp group. That was when things started to turn. First, it was the mindless, constant images of gore he would send, involving torture victims and murdered children. I don't know if these images were real, but they made me very uncomfortable, to the point I'd ask him to stop, to which I was told to take a joke. This was followed by messages where he stated he'd killed a cat, along with sick fantasies involving people I knew. I wasn't sure if Ben was just your average edgelord, which was my other friend's attitude, but something didn't seem right. Then, one Saturday, I was alone Christmas shopping in town when I noticed Ben standing down the road from me, just staring directly at me. I waved at him awkwardly, to which he just stared before walking casually down a side street. For the rest of the trip, every time I turned, Ben was standing, just staring at me at a distance. I eventually gave up shopping and went home. I was pissed. I texted him about it, to which he just stated he didn't know what I was talking about. Then in school at lunchtime, Ben and another friend Jack convinced me to come with him to the forest behind our school, with another friend named Zach. It was stupid, I know, but I was bored and was accompanied. Anyway, we started getting deeper in, and Ben was becoming weird. He was laughing and kept repeating, "Closer, closer." Eventually both Zach and I agreed it was creepy and off-putting, and we went back to school. Ben seemed pissed off when he and Jack returned. However, when we asked why they wanted us to go further, he responded he wanted to set a fire and show us. After this, I distanced myself and left the group chat, though was eventually re-added. While on hiatus from that group, Ben attacked Tom with a homemade blade. I believe it was a razor from a sharpener. He did it in school, resulting in a wound near his wrist, and that resulted in Ben being expelled from school. However, no legal action was taken. It's now been a month, and I was re-added to the group chat to find that Ben has been sending graphic self-harm photos and talking about his hatred for his family, blaming them for his misfortune. I'm worried he genuinely gives killer vibes, but perhaps I'm just paranoid. I often wonder about that time in the forest and in the town plaza. Anyway, thanks for listening. Should I be concerned, or am I just overreacting? I sometimes worry that Ben knows where I live and isn't far away. I'm a park ranger, but I'm leaving my name and the name of the park out of this post intentionally. The names of all those involved have been changed as well. I needed to get this story out there, but I cannot rely on conventional avenues. That's why I'm posting it here. I could lose my job, or much worse, but this story has to be told. I owe it to Catherine. I arrived at the ranger station like any other day. I was given my section of the park to patrol. Unfortunately, the park is massive, and my section usually includes half of it, so there isn't much chance for leisurely strolls on the trails. I hopped in my work vehicle, a 10-year-old 4x4, and headed out to see if anyone needed assistance. It didn't take long to find someone. At the first campground, there was a man who couldn't get his camper started. A quick jump got him rolling along. Next was a couple needing directions, then an overturned canoe. I had only made it a few miles through the park. I was going to have to move if I hoped to make a full route today. I managed to grab a few quick bites of lunch and put some miles on without anyone needing help. When the call came over the radio, there was a hiker that found something, and I needed to go check it out. A half hour later, I was talking to a middle-aged woman who had made a concerning discovery. She found a hat and a note on the trail. I read the note. It said, "I'm writing this note and leaving it behind because I'm not sure what's happening. The 5 of us friends have been planning this trip forever, even since long before we graduated, but it always seemed like something came up at the last minute, and one or more of us couldn't go. For a while, I was almost convinced that some outside force was working against us, that we were cursed not to go camping together until we were all too old to enjoy it. I could picture Devin now. He would still go, even if he was so old he had to use a walker on the trail. He's always up for camping. I think the guy carries a loaded backpack in his car with him everywhere he goes. LOL. Adrienne got here right behind us, followed soon after by Devin. Of course, Terry was the last one to show. We started up the trail in great spirits. 3 miles in the sun was just starting to heat up. We were making good time towards the rustic campground when Devin decided to take a detour. He said he'd heard about an old trail that no one used anymore, and he wanted to check it out. I said we should keep going the way we were, but I was outvoted. I honestly don't think Terry's vote should have counted, since he was obviously stoned, and Devin just bullied him into saying yes. We came to a spot with a large stone off to the side of the trail. Devin said it was the trailhead, but I didn't see any trail. He led us through some heavy brush, but on the other side it cleared out, and we could see the faint impression of an overgrown trail. I went last and left my hat on the stone in case we got lost and needed to be rescued. I think that's exactly where we're heading, straight toward Lost. I'll leave this note under my hat and hope that someone finds us. I asked the woman to show me where she'd found it, and she showed me. 3 miles later, I was staring at the rock I hoped I would never see again. I radioed my location to the station and told them that if they didn't hear from me in a couple of hours, to send a search party to the old abandoned trail. I wished I would have brought my supplies with me, my backpack and my sidearm, but they were 3 miles away, and I didn't know how long these kids had been on this trail. I knew that wasted time could mean the difference between life and death. At least I had my knife, flashlight, and binoculars. So I thanked the woman, placed the red hat back on the stone just in case, and headed into the heavy brush. Once through the initial overgrowth, the trail became visible. Old memories flashed through my head, ones I never wanted to think of again. I took a deep breath and headed down the trail. It was overgrown for the first mile or so, and then it opened up into a field. I could see people had walked through before me by the way the weeds were partially trampled. As I walked through, a deer jumped ahead of me, startling me. Until that moment, I didn't realize how jumpy I was. I tried to settle down and tell myself that these kids were just lost, and I could catch up to them and get them out. Telling myself that didn't make the memories go away. I entered a clearing with a fallen log, and another note with a rock sitting on it. The note read, "I think I'm being silly. This trail isn't so bad. Maybe I was wrong. Devin seems to know where he's going. I just can't shake this feeling that we're being watched. Sometimes I'll look around, and I swear I see a face disappear behind a tree. Am I being paranoid? Maybe if the birds would start singing again, that would lighten my mood. But I haven't heard a bird or any other animal for a while. I wonder why they're being so quiet. Are they afraid of us?" On another note, Terry seems to be brooding more than usual. Maybe he forgot to bring enough of his stash to the last trip. Devin is in his glory, since everyone has to rely on him for directions. Adrienne and Dean seem to be along for the ride, although I have noticed Dean looking around at the trees as well. Maybe I'll ask him if he sees anything. If you're trying to track us down, I hope we aren't being too much bother. I just have this feeling. I folded the note and stuck it in my pocket, then prayed she was wrong about being followed. I pushed on, beginning to miss my backpack with the supplies in it, especially the water bottles. The trees provided some shade, so the sunlight wasn't shining directly on me. But hiking is always thirsty work. The birds chirping in the trees made me almost forget about the desperate mission I was on to save these 5 kids. My mind wandered back to the kid I couldn't save. It had been shortly after I started as a park ranger. An 11-year-old boy had gotten lost on this very trail. His parents searched frantically for him before calling us in to look. I remember hoping to be the one to find him as we formed search parties and searched on, in, and around every inch of the trail. In the end, I got my wish. I found him, but I wish I hadn't. I pushed the memory to the back of my mind and focused on the trail. It was starting to fade. The trampling of feet wasn't making enough of a difference, and I was starting to lose my way. Out here, that can be deadly. I kept moving forward and finally regained the trail just in time to reach the fork. I looked back and forth from one choice to the other and couldn't see a difference between the two. I searched for any broken twigs or plants that would give me a hint, but there were none. Just when I was about to give up and flip a coin, I saw a piece of paper in the weeds barely visible. I dug it out and read it. The note said, "It seems like we have a dilemma. A fork in the road, as it were. You would think I would be happy to see the doubt in Devin's eyes as he looked from one choice to the other, but you'd be wrong. It made my confidence plummet. It made me think that we were never getting out of here. Everyone's running out of water." Devin yelled at us for not conserving, but I saw him drink the last of his too. He ranted and raved at us for a while, but we all knew that he was just mad because he didn't know what to do. In the end, he flipped a coin. We all did our best not to laugh. Adrienne is reaching the end of her rope with Devin and his attitude. Dean has been playing peacemaker, trying to keep them from going at it too much. Terry was being way too quiet. I haven't seen him light up once. Something's up with him, but every time I ask, he says it's nothing. The birds still aren't singing, and it's starting to really bother me. The strange feeling I have hasn't gone away. I asked Dean if he'd seen anything strange, but he won't talk about it. We've been on this trail for a while. I'm hoping to come to the end soon. By the way, in case the note got moved or blown around, we took the left trail. I was panicked by the end of reading that note, and so relieved she mentioned which trail to take. I radioed in and reported that I was on the trail of the missing hikers. I mentioned the fork and taking the left side. I was told that there was no search party going on yet, that I was the only one looking for these kids. It was the complete opposite years ago, looking for that kid. Everyone was searching. I know we combed every inch of that wilderness, but that's the thing about the woods. You can search every nook and cranny, but something can still stay hidden. The sun was going down, and I still had no idea how close I was to catching up to these kids. I could stumble across them in the next clearing, or they could be hours ahead of me. I met with a woman who showed me the hat and note in the afternoon. If they started out around daybreak, they could be a good 5 or 6 hours ahead of me. If the leader is so driven to continue, it's hard to say how far they might be. I continued following the trail until I came to a fallen tree across a river. I looked both ways along the edge of the water, but saw no trail, so I made my way across the tree. I could picture the debate the kids had when they got here. I chuckled at the thought of Devin having to convince them to go across. I believe I made up a lot of time with that single crossing. I jumped down to the water and drank my fill. Then I climbed back up, feeling much better. It was tough to pick up the trail on the other side. I was glad to find a note sticking to a branch. It read, "Oh my gosh, Devin just about came unglued when we got to that tree over the river. He hopped on it right away and started across, but the rest of us weren't so sure the trail led that way. We asked him how a trail could be planned with a fallen tree as part of it. He sputtered and stopped and told us how lost we'd be without him. Dean had finally had enough and told him we were lost because of him. I seriously thought Dean was going to take a swing at him until Terry, of all people, came to his side and told Devin to shut up. The rest of us all came together and told Devin he could keep leading us as long as he stopped acting like a petty tyrant. He didn't take it well. In the end, he told us we could all go to hell. He sat on the log and refused to move. Eventually, after we took a break and refilled our water bottles in the river, Dean said we should get going and led us across the tree. Devin followed along, acting like a whipped puppy. Dean and I talked about the disappearing face we'd seen a while back, but neither of us had seen it again. At least the birds are back to singing. I chuckled, figuring that Devin would be a big baby over the whole thing. But after the chuckle came concern. Deposed leaders are usually dangerous. I wondered how much offense Devin had taken, and if he would be looking to get some payback in some small or large way. Darkness was coming on fast in the woods. I had to make a decision. Camp for the night, or keep going. If I camped, I could defend against the predators that lurked in the darkness. But if I kept moving, there was a good chance I could stumble across the group before daybreak. It wasn't much of a decision. These kids that I didn't even know, that I plunged headfirst into the woods without even my backpack of supplies. Of course, I was going to try to catch up with them. If I had done that years back, would that kid still be alive? Such thoughts nagged at me. Most days I kept them at bay, but here in this same forest, close to the spot where I found him, I needed to focus. If I'm going to keep after them, I need to get going. I stepped off the trail to take a piss, and heard a metallic snap at the same time I felt intense pain shoot up my leg. I looked down, and I'd stepped into a bear trap. I screamed, fell to the ground, and rocked back and forth in agony. After a few minutes, I focused on getting the trap off my leg. I found a branch and pried the trap open. screaming the entire time. I managed to pull the trap off my leg and threw it to the side. I really didn't want to take my boot off, but I had to see the damage. It took every ounce of effort I could muster to unlace the boot and pull it off. My leg was purple. I felt along the wound very gently, but there didn't seem to be any break. That didn't mean I wasn't going to be limping for the next month, but it did mean I would buy this brand of boots for the rest of my life. It took much more effort and some more screaming to put the boot back on, but I knew I needed to keep moving. I laced up the boot and found a sturdy branch to use as a crutch. I struggled to my feet and took my first few ginger steps. Once I got into a rhythm, it got easier, but I couldn't walk as fast as I had been. Of course, when I was at my weakest was when I heard footsteps in the trees close to me. I knew there was a predator around, just because it could sense I was vulnerable. I leaned against a tree and held my crutch ready as a weapon. The footsteps came closer. They paused as if they knew I was ready. They slowly continued stalking me. They were deliberate, but slow. Each step seemed measured, as if waiting for the right moment to strike. I heard it right next to the tree I was hiding behind. I whipped around as best as I could and raised my crutch to strike. A deer stared at me for a heartbeat, and then turned and ran through the forest. I collapsed against the tree and slid down to the ground, allowing the adrenaline to bleed off. I don't remember falling asleep. I woke to sandpaper scraping the side of my face. I opened my eyes, and there was a bear beside me, licking my cheek. I freaked out, screamed, and rolled away from it. The bear wasn't ready for that reaction. It startled and ran away. I slowed my rapid breathing and looked around. It was dark. There were thin shafts of moonlight beaming through the trees, providing a bit of light. I checked my watch, and it was nearly 4 in the morning. I rose slowly and gingerly on my injured ankle, took the small flashlight out of my pocket, and prayed it still worked. My prayers were answered when the beam shone brightly through the woods. I panned around, trying to get my bearings. After a moment, I found the trail and started hobbling toward it. The nightly noises were a comfort, at least if the crickets were chirping and the rest of the forest was singing its nightly tune. That meant predators weren't around. I stumbled and fell, hitting my injured ankle against a rock. The pain overwhelmed me, and I screamed. After a few minutes of recovery, I got up and continued at a slower pace, paying more attention to the ground. I chided myself for falling asleep and losing so much time. At least the trail was easy to follow. I continued on through the night, hoping it wasn't too late. I started thinking about the boy I'd failed to rescue, and what would happen if I failed to rescue these kids. I'm sure the Rangers Department would say I did my best. I wasn't worried about them. It was me. Would I be able to forgive myself for letting something happen again? My thoughts were interrupted when I stumbled into a clearing. Not just any clearing. There were the remnants of a fire. There were impressions from tent pegs being pulled out of the ground. All around were the signs of a very recent campsite, including a tent that was still set up. I got so excited, I nearly fell over my crutch looking around for signs of anything. The tent was a mixed blessing. It was very ominous that it was still here while the others were gone, but I was able to find some supplies to take along for my search. The most important was food. I shoved some protein bars in my pocket while devouring some beef jerky. I also grabbed 2 bottles of water from the pack. I stumbled across a note sitting under a rock beside the smoldering fire. Before I sat, I held my hand out to the fire. It was still warm, but the embers were nearly dead. It had been hours since it was first lit. If I hadn't taken my unintentional nap, I would have caught up with them. There was nothing I could do but sit by the dying fire and read the note, hoping there was good news. The note read, "We found this clearing and decided to camp. Everyone was tired from walking, and the mood was somber because no one seemed to know where we were. All of us had been hiking in this forest before, but none of us had ever seen or heard of this trail. We set up our tents and started a fire, then had some supper and sat around. No one really felt like talking, so I tried to get the ball rolling by asking Terry why he was late. He hesitated, but at my prompting eventually, he told us that he'd hit an animal with his car on the way here. I asked if it was a deer, and he said no, it was much too big to be a deer. He said it walked upright on 2 legs, and it was massive, like 8 feet tall, covered in brown hair. He swerved to miss it, but the strangest thing was, it seemed to try to jump in front of him anyway, like it wanted him to stop. We all listened with rapt attention. Just then, off in the distance, we heard a scream. We all froze. Devin started spouting off and yelling at Terry for trying to scare us. Then he stormed off. Dean tried to stop him, but he pushed him away and disappeared in the woods. The rest of us talked, trying to decide if we should go look for him. But in the end, we figured we should just let him go and cool off. A short while later, we heard rustling off in the distance and a muffled cry. We huddled a little closer together and went on high alert. Our eyes darted back and forth as we searched the impenetrable wall of trees surrounding us, looking for any sign of a predator. Right then, the strangest thing happened. All the nightly noises stopped. The crickets, the squirrels, the owls, every sound that you usually hear in a forest at night simply ceased. It was unnerving. For a moment, I wondered if I hadn't gone deaf. Our eyes darted all around in the darkness. We all huddled closer to the fire. Dean pulled out his hunting knife. None of us said a word. It was like if we spoke, something bad would happen. Somehow, whatever caused the noises to stop would find us if we spoke. Someone did speak, though, just not who we expected. "Why are you here?" came a raspy, deep voice that seemed to echo from everywhere. We looked all around, and finally, a man stepped into the light. He was large, well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders, and older, maybe in his 50s or 60s. He was also wearing a park ranger's uniform. It looked old and shabby, like he'd been wearing it for a long time. There were no name tag or park patches. At that point, we didn't care. We had been rescued. We clamored around him, saying how glad we were that he had found us. We told him about going on the trail and how we weren't sure where we even were. The man listened, then slowly said, "You shouldn't be here." We all looked at each other. I'm sure the others thought the same as me. No shit, we shouldn't be here. We just told you that. He continued to look at us from one to the other, as though sizing us up. I was starting to get a bit uncomfortable with his silence. I would have thought he would offer to guide us, but he didn't. He kept staring. I think everyone else was getting a bit edgy as well when Dean asked if he could point us in the right direction. He looked at Dean, as if deciding to answer him or not. "I can guide you," he said, "but first, you should have some rest." We all agreed that the day had been long and stressful. We decided to take his advice and turn in. We offered him some food and water, but he refused, saying he wasn't hungry. We each went to our tents and laid down. Before I settled in and finished this note, I popped my head back out of my tent to check on our guide. He was sitting by the fire, staring into the orange coals. I thought I heard him mumbling, or maybe humming something softly. I quietly zipped up my tent and went to sleep. Sometime later, someone banged on my tent. I woke and unzipped it to find the ranger with a strange look in his eyes. "We need to go." "Why?" I said, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. "It's not safe here." he said with an edge of panic in his voice. I popped back into my tent to change, and came out and met with everyone. They were all in states of semi-consciousness as well. Everyone but the ranger seemed to be confused. "Pack up. We need to leave," he said a little more forcefully. I was about to protest when I heard a piercing scream in the distance. His head shot up, and he stared in the direction of the sound. "Move it," he said. "Pack up." We didn't need to be told again. The scream brought us all fully awake. We tore down our tents in record time and packed everything into our backpacks. As I was finishing up, I noticed Devon's tent was still up. "Where's Devon?" I asked. "Who's Devon?" the ranger replied. "He's another one of our friends," I said. "He went off into the woods alone right before you got here." "He didn't come back," the ranger said. "Should we go look for him?" I asked. The ranger extended his arms and did a slow circle. "Which way would you go?" he asked. I understood his point. How would we even know where he had gone? If he was still on the path or not? It just seemed like we should do something. "What about his gear?" I asked. "Do we take it with us?" The ranger looked at me like he was annoyed at having to answer such questions. "Leave it here in case he comes back," he said. "He'll need his supplies." I'm not even sure if I'll keep leaving notes or not, now that we have a ranger to guide us. Whoever finds this, please look for Devon and make sure he's okay. A ranger. All the rangers in this park are in their 30s or 40s. Maybe it was someone who retired and was just roaming around out there. But why would he be in a ranger outfit, sitting here by the dying embers of the fire, with a tent set up in front of me? It was very tempting to take a rest. If they're in the hands of a capable ranger, I could get some rest before the long hike back out of here. But I knew I'd already taken my rest for the night. If not for that, I would have been here hours ago, probably before the other ranger. I set out again, feeling tired but determined. The campsite made me more hopeful than I'd been all day. At least they were together and thinking like campers. If only I knew who this ranger was. The sun was an hour away from rising, so I took out my flashlight to follow the trail. I zipped up the tent before I left, just in case its owner did come back. Wouldn't want any animals getting in and taking everything. It's bad enough when injured park rangers do it. The trail stayed level for a while as dawn peeked over the trees. The trail started heading upward, which was bad news for me and my bum ankle. It made things harder, but I had my trusty makeshift crutch to help me. Dawn crept into the forest, giving me a bit of assistance. At least I wouldn't have to waste a hand holding a flashlight. As the climb grew steeper, the trail grew more narrow. At times, it was only the width of 1 foot. I held onto trees and whatever I could as I scaled the extremely narrow trail. At the most difficult, I paused and seriously considered turning back. As I looked around for any other way to keep going, I saw brightly colored fabric at the bottom of the ravine. I carefully balanced as I took out my binoculars and looked. It was a backpack, and attached to it was the body of a girl in her early 20s. She looked like she'd hit her head on the rocks at the bottom. Her face was bloody and mauled. Her clothes were ripped and soaked in blood. There was no doubt an animal had gotten to her. The only question was she alive when it started feeding on her? I looked away, but felt my determination double to find these missing kids. They might be with a ranger, but they were still in terrible danger. I slowly continued up the narrow trail. At times I was sure the ground would give out from under me, and I would share the same fate as the poor unfortunate girl at the bottom of the ravine. It was then I remembered my radio. I tried to call in and report the location of the body, but the only response I got was static. I was determined to try again When I got to the top of the trail, it was yet another motivation to keep going, to be careful, to survive. It seemed like hours at a snail's pace, working my way up to the side of that ravine. Finally, I clawed my way over the edge to the top. I rolled over onto solid ground and lay there for a few minutes. Once I caught my breath, I got up slowly and painfully. I hadn't done my ankle any favors. I limped toward what looked like the trail and began following. It wasn't long before I came across the remnants of another campsite. The fire was a little warmer than the last one. I stoked it up, threw some more wood on, and got it going. I knew I needed some rest. I searched around and found a note, and sat down on a log by the fire to read it. I can't believe Adrienne's gone. We started up this steep ravine, and the trail kept getting more narrow. I asked the ranger if there was any other way around, but he just glared at me and said no. We all struggled with our heavy packs on our backs. At one point, I was on all fours, just trying to keep from sliding into the ravine. That's when it happened. Adrienne was having trouble keeping her feet on the trail. She kept slipping. I reached out and helped her balance a few times, being right in front of me. I kept an eye on her whenever I could. That wasn't nearly as much as I wanted, because I was watching my own feet. She slipped once, and I tried to grab her, but she had tipped over, and the weight of her backpack dragged her over the side. I watched in horror as she tumbled down into the ravine, bouncing off trees as she went. I saw her skull make a solid impact several times as she tumbled to the bottom and slid to a stop. I couldn't see if she was still breathing or not. As I called her name, she didn't move. I called for the ranger in front of us and pointed to her unmoving body. He stared at her for a long time. I don't know if he was trying to see if she was alive or not. He told us to keep going up the trail to the top, and he would go check on her. I watched as he carefully made his way down the nearly sheer slope. We kept moving forward as instructed. He was only halfway down when we made it to the top. I was a wreck. I was so happy we made it, but so sad for Adrienne. I didn't hold out much hope that the ranger was going to come trotting into camp with her on his back, saying she only had a few bumps and bruises. We started a fire and then sat around it in a stupor. Finally, Terry came over and talked to me. I understand she was your friend, but she was ours too, he said. We need to work together to get out of here, for them. That's so stupid it makes sense, I said with the remnants of a smile. It was then the ranger reappeared. He sat by the fire and didn't say a word. There was something in his eyes. It wasn't sadness, but I don't know exactly what it was. We knew she wasn't coming back. We rested for a little while, then started out on the trail again. If you're following us, I hope you're being careful. Stay safe. Well, this girl is something else. With all she's gone through, she still wants me to be safe. I hope I find her. I think she'd make a good ranger. My guilty conscience jumped up on my back and yelled at me. How can you sit around and rest when that poor girl just lost her friend and needs your help? I knew it was right. I just didn't know why the other ranger was being so careless. I struggled to get up, kicked out the fire, and started after them. The daylight was dimming, but it was only 8 in the morning. I looked up and saw why. Storm clouds were overtaking the sky. Yet another reason I wish I would have brought my backpack. The raindrops hit like a cold slap in the face. Even though it was still September, out here in the mountains, the weather can change in a heartbeat. We weren't at the top of the mountain, but in the middle was enough for the weather change to make me shiver. Now that we were out of the ravine, I tried my radio again, but it was still just static. I knew there were some places where the radio inexplicably wouldn't work, I just hoped to get away from the interference before it was too late. The trail was clear in front of me, but that was little comfort when walking in open fields with no rain cover. All those trees I tromped through, and now in the rain. I hate wide open spaces. I'd say someone doesn't like me. The rain didn't just pass like a spring shower. It poured so hard it became difficult to see in front of me. For a long time, I trudged through the rain. At times it felt like I was walking in place. The mud was starting to cake on my boots. And then my salvation appeared. In front of me, on the trail, was a tent. I called out before I unzipped the tent and let myself in. I flopped to the wonderful dry floor, then quickly turned and zipped the entrance back up. I breathed a sigh of relief, but as I did, a stench assaulted my nose. I looked over at the sleeping bag. It was full. "I'm sorry to barge in like this, but I needed to get out of the rain," I said. No response. I nudged the person in the bag. It tipped to the side and rocked right back. That's when I noticed the splotches of red that had soaked through the bag. I didn't want to see, but I pulled the top of the sleeping bag away from the person's face. The bad part was they no longer had a face. It had been ripped away, and the neck had been gouged out. There were large wounds on the body as well. I tried to feel for a pulse, but when my fingers went straight into the muscle of the neck, I figured there was no pulse to feel. I wiped my fingers on the sleeping bag and pondered why this person was covered. I know the animal who did this didn't gently cover up the person with a sleeping bag when it was done. I found my answer laying above the head of the person. It was a note, and on the note was written, "I can't believe Terry's dead. I wish I'd never come on this trip. I wish I'd never let Devin bully us into turning down this damn trail. Where the hell is Devin anyway? When he stormed off on his little pity party, did he run across whatever creature had been stalking us? Is he sitting back in his tent now, enjoying himself? I really don't know." We were enjoying not climbing up the face of a ravine, but we were very tired. I mentioned stopping and camping for a bit to the ranger. He looked around and even sniffed at the air. That seemed like a weird thing to do. But after that, he agreed to let us set up camp. He even told us to do it as quickly as we could. We gathered wood for a fire, but he told us not to bother because the rain was coming. I guess that explains the sniffing the air thing. Our tents had been up maybe 15 minutes when it started raining. It quickly turned into a downpour. We all offered the ranger to sit in our tents with us. He looked over us one by one. It was kind of creepy. Finally, he said he would sit with Terry in his tent. Dean and I looked at each other with relieved expressions. The ranger is helping us, but he isn't someone I'd like to see ever again. He just acts too weird. At times I wonder if he's really helping. I just closed my eyes, listening to the rain on the tent, and letting it carry me off to dreamland when the ranger ripped open my tent. He said we needed to pack up and leave right now, that something was hunting us. We dove out into the rain and miserably packed our tents. He reassured us that there was a cave nearby and we could get shelter there. As I was packing up, I didn't see Terry, so I went over to his tent and knocked. When there was no answer, I went in and found what was left of his body. Something had torn him to shreds. I covered my mouth to keep from vomiting and ran out to tell the others. Dean and the ranger looked in and saw that there was no helping him. The ranger said he'd left the tent to go to the bathroom, and when he came back, he saw a predator hanging around the tents. That's when he came and woke us. It must have already gotten to Terry. I pulled his sleeping bag over his head and wished we had time to give him a proper burial, but the ranger said the animal might be back for the rest of us, so we quickly packed and left. I barely had time to finish this note. Please, help us. A cave? What kind of ranger is he? Doesn't he realize that would be the most likely place a large predator would call home? I thought for a moment what cave he could be talking about. I hadn't been on this trail for 5 years, ever since I found the kid here. Then it hit me. We were very close to the place where we found him. Why would he take them there? Unless... I jumped up so quickly that I nearly fell on top of the body when I forgot, and put too much weight on my injured ankle. I hobbled out of the tent and went as quickly as I could toward the place I swore I'd never see again. I approached the cave, and my heart sank. 2 backpacks sat just inside the entrance. I pulled out my knife and flashlight, then cautiously peeked inside. I felt a change in the breeze, and turned to find the ranger staring at me. I looked him up and down. "You," I said. "The last time I saw you was when we found the boy." He said nothing. "It was never a random animal attack," I said. "It was you." He took a step toward me. "Of course it was," he said. "How wonderful was it to watch you years ago as you floundered around, looking for some predator that stood beside you." "You son of a bitch," I replied. I pulled out my knife and held it ready. He paused, then smiled. "Do you really think that knife can hurt me?" I looked at it. "Pretty sure," I said. "It's made of iron." His smile vanished. "So you do know what I am." I pulled out a bottle of brown water. I made sure to grab some runoff from the rainstorm. I said, "It might not do as good as rust water, but let's find out." I opened the bottle and threw some water at him. He dodged it as though it was acid. At the same time, I swung with the knife. He dodged with ease. "Why don't you turn into that big thing that you are?" I said, taunting him. "Because we both know, when I transform, I'm vulnerable for a moment," he said, "and I'm sure you would love to take advantage of a vulnerable moment." He swung and connected with my stomach, knocking the wind out of me. I recovered and swung the knife in a vicious downswing at him, which he easily dodged. I kept moving forward, stabbing and slashing at him. I couldn't get close enough to connect. He was too fast. "You can't defeat me," he said. "Look at you, like an injured deer, just waiting to be devoured." "Be quiet, Yinoglushi," I yelled. At the mention of his name, he froze. I knew I didn't have much time. I took advantage of the moment, lunging at him with my knife. If I had been uninjured, I would have closed the distance between us with 2 quick steps and buried the knife in his heart. Unfortunately, in the heat of the moment, I forgot about my injured ankle. I stepped forward on my good leg, then faltered when I tried to put weight on the injured one. Instead of burying the knife in his heart, it went through his left thigh. He screamed in pain and ran out of the cave. I took out my flashlight and started toward the back of the cave. There, I found a mutilated body next to a pile of bones. There was a note in her hand. I sat down, took it, and read, "I can't believe how stupid I was not to see this much sooner. All this time, guiding us was just a ploy. He never wanted to help us. He never cared about any of us or our safety. I need to write this quickly before he comes back. The ranger led us here and told us to wait, that we'd be safe in the cave. He left us alone." Dean pulled out his flashlight and explored deeper in the cave. He found a large pile of bones. Off to the side of them was a pile of clothes. We ran toward the opening, but the ranger had returned. "So you didn't listen," he said, leering at us. "I told you to stay here, not explore my home." "What are you?" I asked. He smiled for the first time since I'd met him, but his smile wasn't comforting. It was terrifying. I watched in horror as he changed into a giant cat creature. He didn't look quite like a panther or mountain lion. He lunged at us with amazing speed. He grabbed my leg and tore a large gash in it. I fell to the floor screaming. Dean tried to defend me, swinging his knife around and holding it at bay, but it stalked around him and cornered him. He only had one chance. He looked at me with sadness in his eyes and then ran past the creature and out of the cave. It looked at me and my leg, then sprinted out after Dean. I know why he did it. He was trying to give me time to escape, but with my leg, there was no way I could outrun that thing. What he actually did was give me time to say goodbye. If you're reading this, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I led you to your death. If you do somehow survive and make it out of here, please tell our families what really happened here. Goodbye. I fought back tears as I read the final words of this brave girl. I limped to the front of the cave and looked out as the rain stopped. It was like seeing a new world being born. I tried my radio and got an immediate answer. I gave them my GPS coordinates and told them to prepare for casualties. I'm still a park ranger even months later. I made sure that the trail was sealed off. I carry an iron knife and rust water with me at all times. I carry the rust water in a squirt gun, just in case. The bones were removed from the cave and subjected to DNA testing. Aside from this group of victims, including Devon, there were several other people who had gone missing in the park over the years. The official version of the events was that a rogue animal had been hunting people. I was told it would be best for my career if I didn't reveal the true nature of the predator. I still search for the creature and post signs everywhere to be on the lookout for an older ranger with a uniform with no patches on it. There's a number to call if anyone spots him. It's my personal cell phone number. From time to time, I hear reports of a large cat that's limping on its hind leg. I try to make my way to that spot as quickly as possible, but I have yet to catch him. I posted this story in memory of that brave girl, but also as a warning. Never go on an unposted trail, and be aware of those you meet in the woods, even if they wear a uniform. My shrieks of agony reached a pitch and volume I didn't know I was capable of, as the enormous, demonic-looking creature sank its huge razor-sharp teeth into my shoulder, tearing through muscle and sinew. I refused to release my grip on the truck's door handle, so the monster chewed through my shoulder and ripped my body away from it. As it dragged me into the woods, kicking and screaming, blood pouring from my shoulder, I looked back at my arm, still hanging onto the door in desperation. Once it had dragged me so far into the woods that I could no longer see the lights of the truck, it released me. I tried to run, but the loss of blood weakened me. I got halfway to my feet before stumbling back to the ground. I tried again and again, but gravity kept yanking me back down. I didn't have the energy to make a run for it. Every time I tried, more blood poured out of my mangled shoulder. It watched me struggle with that nightmare mouth formed into a smile. It was enjoying this. It was toying with me. My breaths came in ragged gasps as my body grew dangerously low on blood. I knew I was barely clinging to life. My will to live was gone. I had no fight left in me. Desperation had set in, but there was nothing left to act on. All I could do was lay there and wait for the inevitable. I guess I was no longer amusing if I wasn't trying to escape. It stepped over and picked me up by the neck. Pain screamed at me to do something, but there wasn't anything I could do. It grasped the top of my head and turned it sideways, pulling my face into its maw of blood-stained teeth. I could smell the horrid stench of death and decay as it closed its mouth on my face. I woke and sat straight up in bed, gulping massive breaths of air. I felt like I was drowning in total darkness. My head swiveled around so quickly that I nearly gave myself whiplash as I searched for anything to show where I was. Eventually, my hand landed on my bedstand. I felt the hard wood and recognized it. My hand crept silently along until it discovered my cell phone. I turned the light on and shone it around. My wife lay in bed beside me, sleeping peacefully. If I wanted to keep it that way, I would be quiet and stop shining the light on her. My sweaty palms and brow were the only remaining evidence of the nightmare I'd awoken from. My side of the bed was wet, but I told myself that it was sweat. My breathing slowly returned to normal as my mind told me it was a dream. I reached up and touched my face to make sure it was still there. Once that was confirmed, I reached for my shoulder and found it still attached to the rest of me. I got up and went to the bathroom. I then splashed some cold water on my face before checking the time. It was 4:30 in the morning, only an hour before my normal time to get up. I debated staying awake, but in the end, decided a little more sleep would do me good. After all, it was just a dream. My morning was like every other weekday morning. I got up, showered, and had some breakfast. Just as I was getting ready to head out the door, my 8-year-old daughter, Angeline, came downstairs to get ready for school. She insisted I give her a hug every morning before I left for work and promised to be safe. The morning run was nothing out of the ordinary. The same headache as every day delivering car parts to garages. I joked with one of the managers that my week went Monday, 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 Friday. He laughed and agreed that sometimes it felt like his weeks went the same way. In the afternoon, it was my turn to do the late run. Twice a week, I had to drive the big box truck down to the main warehouse in the afternoon to pick up the parts for the following morning's run. I didn't really like the late run, especially in winter when it started getting dark early. I usually got home around 8, which was Angeline's bedtime. I would get home just in time to tuck her in and kiss her goodnight. If I ran late, she wouldn't go to sleep until I tucked her in. That afternoon wasn't much different than any other, with one exception. I couldn't get the nagging feeling of déjà vu out of my head. I knew I'd done this run countless times before, but this time seemed different. Like there was a growing expectation that something was about to happen. Traffic didn't seem any worse than any other time, although I knew that there was always a danger when dealing with drivers. Accidents happened fast, and you couldn't always avoid them. I kept a wary eye on the other cars and trucks around me, but still, there was a growing dread in my mind. It increased with every mile I drove. Finally, it hit me. My nightmare. It had been on this road, and I was coming up on the area where it happened. I tried to laugh it off and tell my brain that it was just a coincidence, that I traveled this road twice a week for years. Of course I was going to dream about it sometime. Trying to laugh it off or deny it was having the opposite effect. I was only a few miles away from the spot, and my heart was racing. I tried turning on the radio to calm my nerves, but the song playing was Metallica's All Nightmare Long. That wasn't helping. I was only a mile away now. I remembered seeing a specific bridge in my nightmare, and I knew it was coming up. My fingers white-knuckled the steering wheel. My eyes darted back and forth, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Out of the ordinary, I chuckled. Like a demonic beast chewing my arm off and dragging me into the woods to devour me. I had just reached the bridge when my phone rang. nearly giving me a heart attack. Once the ice had melted out of my veins, I turned it on speaker so I wouldn't get pulled over. "Hello?" I said. "Daddy?" Angelina's voice said over the phone. "What's up, sweetie?" I asked. "Where are you?" "I'm on my way down to the warehouse," I responded. "When will you be home?" "Probably around 8, I said. "Can't you come home now?" she said, with quiet desperation. "Why? Is something wrong?" I said, suddenly feeling very nervous. She paused for a long moment. "Are you and Mommy okay?" I asked. "Oh no, we're fine," she responded. "Then what's the problem?" I continued. "Oh, nothing," she said. "I just wanted you home." "Okay, well, I'll be home around 8. Love you," I said. "I love you too, Daddy," she said back. She hung up the phone as I smiled and shook my head. I'd love to be home earlier, I thought. The road stretched out in front of me suddenly felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something had changed. I drove the rest of the way to the warehouse, trying to figure out what. It wasn't until I had loaded and was halfway home that I realized I had missed seeing the spot where my nightmare happened because I was talking to Angeline. I chuckled to myself, thinking how worked up I'd gotten over a silly dream. I pulled into the driveway a few minutes before 8 and went straight to Angeline's room to tuck her in. "Daddy," she said, jumping into my arms. "Whoa, someone's glad to see me," I said, hugging her and laying her back in bed. "You made it," she said. "Don't I always?" I replied. "Did you see him?" she asked. "See who?" "Oh, no one," she said. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart. Good night," I said to her. I closed her door, feeling more than a bit confused. I walked into the kitchen, where my nose and eyes were equally treated to the smell of the delicious food that my wife was getting out of the microwave. "What was going on with her today?" I asked as I sat down at the table. "What do you mean?" my wife asked. "You mean the phone call?" I nodded, my fork halfway to my mouth. "She came home from school and said she needed to talk to you right away," my wife continued. "She didn't say why," I said between bites. "No, just that it was important." "Weird," I replied. "She's 8, my wife said, smiling. "She probably just missed her daddy." "Yeah," I said, sighing. "I get that, but she makes me feel so guilty for getting home late. I wish she understood that's just how life goes sometimes. She'll get there," my wife said, reaching across the table and taking my hand. I smiled and enjoyed the rest of my meal as we talked about our days, and then went to bed. The next morning, Angeline acted as if nothing had happened. She got up, got ready for school, kissed us goodbye, and got on the bus. My day was frustrating, tedious, and long, just like usual. I didn't have the late run and didn't get any phone calls from home. The day after that, however, was another matter. She got out of bed and immediately asked if I had the late run. "Yes, sweetie," I said to her. "Do you have to do it?" she asked. "Yes, sweetie," I said again. "Can't someone else?" she continued. "No, sweetie," I said. "Please, please be safe," she told me. "I will, sweetie." She was very distracted at breakfast and nearly missed the bus. She kept staring at me. I wanted to ask her what was wrong, but I was half afraid of the answer. My morning run that day was easy, and I was able to get started on the afternoon run a bit early. I'd love to surprise the family by arriving home early, I thought, smiling. My smile evaporated as I approached the bridge. All the terror of the nightmare came rushing back, along with Angeline's cryptic comment about seeing someone. I slowed down a bit, and once again my eyes were on swivels. I searched the trees along the side of the road as they rapidly passed by. I was about to shake off my feelings as stupid when my eyes locked on something and my blood froze. In the trees, I saw a set of eyes. My mind tried to write it off as a deer. There were a few problems with that. The deer would had to have been 7 feet tall or standing on its hind legs on the second rung of a ladder. Since I didn't believe either of those things were probable, I had to go with the last option. There was a giant creature standing in the trees, staring at me. All of this processed through my mind in a flash as I drove past. I saw it step out of the trees just before I passed it and bend down as if ready to spring out in front of me. But there was a car right behind me, so it dove back into the cover of the trees. I shook myself mentally as though waking from a dream. That couldn't have been real, I told myself, wishing I believed it. The rest of my trip down, including loading the truck, seemed like some surreal vision. It was like I was floating through a daydream. The trip back made me nervous as I approached the bridge, but I realized I was on the other side of a divided highway. There was a lot of open area between the lanes going north and the lanes going south. Regardless, I kept my eyes trained on the other side of the highway. When I came near the bridge, I didn't know if it was my imagination or if I'd really seen eyes watching me from the other side. I didn't wait around to find out. That night when I got home, Angeline met me at the door and nearly knocked me over in a tight hug. "You made it," she said, squeezing me so tight I could barely breathe. I carried her inside and put her to bed. "Okay, Angeline, what's going on?" I asked. "You're home. That's all that's important," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Has someone been telling you I'm in danger?" She lowered her eyes. "Yes." "Who?" I asked. She looked up and locked eyes with me. "You saw him tonight," she replied. I stood and backed away without realizing I had. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Saw who?" "You know. He watched you. He tried to get you, but he couldn't because of the other car." I dropped to my knees beside her bed. "How did you know that?" I whispered. She reached down and touched my cheek. "I saw it in my dream." I sat there in shock for a long time. "Daddy," Angeline said. I looked at her. "Can you turn off the light now? I'd like to go to sleep," she said to me. Automatically, I stood, kissed her forehead, and stepped out of the room, turning off the light as I went. I went out and collapsed into a kitchen chair. "What's wrong?" my wife asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." My eyes locked on hers. For a long moment, I didn't understand what she'd said. "Are you okay?" she asked, sitting beside me and putting her hand gently on my shoulder. Finally, I roused myself out of my stupor. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm fine. Just Angeline being concerned about me again." "Where do you think that's coming from?" I asked. "I don't know. But she really is worried about you," my wife said. "When she got home, she was tired and wanted to take a nap. A short time after she lay down, I could hear her yelling in her room. I ran to her and she was asleep, but she was screaming, 'No, he's my daddy and you can't have him.' I tried not to turn white as a sheet. Instead, I chuckled. "Huh, kids, where do they come up with this stuff?" I said with a smile. "She loves you," my wife said. "You're her daddy, and she doesn't want to see anything happen to you, so she gets herself all worked up." "You're right," I said, smiling. I kissed her, then ate my supper. After I was done eating, we went to bed and kissed some more. The next day, once again, was like nothing happened. It wasn't until the following Tuesday, the day I would have to take the evening run, that Angeline was beside herself in the morning. "Please don't go today," she begged me. "I have to go to work," I said. "You can't," she tried again. I saw the desperation in her eyes. It frightened me beyond anything. I fought to hide my fear. "Okay, honey," I said. "I haven't called off in a while. I'll take today off." I saw the weight lift from her eyes as she yelled, "Yay!" Then she hugged me tightly and ran out the door to catch the bus. "Are you really taking the day off?" my wife asked. "Are you complaining?" I replied. "Not in the least," she said. "How about a movie?" "Sounds good. I don't remember the last time we watched a movie together." Of course my boss wasn't happy. He told me that if I was faking, I better update my resume. That was one of the best days I'd had in a long time. The next few days were awesome as well. It wasn't until the following Tuesday that the wheels came off. "You can't go," Angeline squealed as I headed for the door. "I have to, honey," I said, trying to calm her down. "If I don't, they'll fire me." "Daddy, please don't go," she said, grabbing my leg and holding on for dear life. "I'm sorry. I took the other day off. If I don't work, we don't eat." I pulled her off of my leg and handed her to my wife as I started out the door. "Calm down, sweetie," she said, holding her tightly as she struggled to get to me. "You don't understand. He's waiting for you," she said to me. I stopped and turned back to her. "Who's waiting?" my wife asked. I stared into Angeline's hopeful eyes. "No one," I said. "I have no idea what she's talking about. Must be her imagination going off the rails again." Her eyes met mine, and betrayal leaked out and down her cheeks. I turned away to keep my heart from breaking. "Daddy," she screamed. I got into my car and drove away, drying my eyes on my sleeve. I tried all morning to get Angeline's look of hurt and betrayal out of my mind. It wasn't until I was halfway down to the warehouse in the afternoon that her words really sank in. "He's waiting for you." My veins turned to ice. I was hurtling toward my doom as I got closer to the bridge. Did I really believe there was a monster waiting for me? Or was this pure coincidence, force-feeding me my daughter's paranoia? My truck was devouring miles faster than I wanted, forcing me into a decision. Should I pull over? If this thing is waiting for me, would it even matter? I couldn't live the rest of my life hiding from fears that weren't even mine. I kept moving, the bridge nearly in sight. I tensed up as I passed under the bridge and passed the spot I dreamed about. I sighed, chuckling at my own foolishness. I was still chuckling when the thing from my nightmare stepped out on the road in front of my truck. Disbelief and terror flooded my eyes as this apparition stood in my way, daring me to hit it. I stood on the brakes and tried to swerve, but it was no use. My truck smashed into the massive monster and came to a screeching halt as it slid sideways on the gravel on the berm and off the side of the road. I sat there, blinded by the airbag, waiting for it to collapse as I peeled my fingers off the steering wheel and unbuckled my seatbelt. I slowly opened the door and stepped out of the truck. The darkness was punctuated by the headlights of passing cars. I stepped around to the front, still in a daze, and looked at the destroyed passenger side of the truck. As I marveled at the destruction, I remembered what I'd hit. I turned to get back in my truck, but my way was blocked by the huge demon-looking creature staring down at me. My nightmare came rushing back to me with stunning vividness as the front of my pants suddenly became wet and a yellow river ran down the side of my pants. Standing very close to this exact spot, my arm grasping the door handle as the creature's teeth tore through my shoulder, leaving a bloody arm still hanging onto the door handle as it dragged me off to the woods to devour me. I stood there remembering my nightmare as if it had already happened and realized it was about to happen. The creature took a step towards me, and I took a step back around the corner of the truck. The only plan my petrified mind could conjure was to keep the truck between myself and this creature. If I took one step at a time, we could do slow laps around the truck all night, but I knew it wouldn't be patient much longer. It wore a feral grin composed of those horribly long, razor-sharp, blood-stained teeth, which told me it was about to strike. The truck sat sideways, shielding us from the lights of the cars as they rushed past us, oblivious to the life-and-death struggle playing out. At first, I held out hope that someone would pull over to check on me, or that a police officer would see my truck and stop to find out what had happened. I saw the creature tensing up to spring at me and realized I didn't have time to wait for any law enforcement or good Samaritans. In fact, I had no time at all. I gripped the door handle and waited for death. I wished I'd listened to Angeline and not gone to work. I wished I was home with my wife and daughter. I wished I didn't know that a creature like this existed. There was only one thing left to do. I closed my eyes and mentally said goodbye to my loved ones. Just as it was about to launch itself at me, I pushed off from the door handle and ran straight into traffic. The last thing I remember was a horn honking, and then pain before the darkness took me. I woke to a white room and machines beeping. Most of my body was wrapped in a cast, and there were ropes hanging from a metal frame that held my arms and legs up. I was in and out of consciousness, but caught snatches of conversations. Multiple bones broken, hip replaced, lucky to be alive. Eventually a policeman did come to talk to me. I told him I'd hit a deer and lost control of the truck. I said I'd become disoriented by the airbag hitting me in the face, and that's why I stumbled into traffic. He told me that the first car to hit me bounced me up in the air, and then I rolled off the roof of the next two cars before landing on the road. He said I was lucky that the cars had managed to stop when they did, or the next car was about to run over my head. I told him I felt lucky to be alive. The next day, my wife and daughter came to visit. Angeline was so happy to see me that she grabbed me in a big hug, sending pain shooting through me. My wife pulled her off of me and explained how much I was hurting. I asked my wife if she would get the nurse to bring me some pain meds. Once she was out of the room, Angeline lowered her voice and asked the question I knew she was dying to ask. Did you see him? I closed my eyes and struggled with what to tell her. Do I let her continue to believe in this creature, or do I lie to put her mind at ease? I looked into those expectant eyes and told her what I thought was best. No, honey, I just had a little accident, that's all. Her look fell from anticipation to disappointment. I understand, was all she said before my wife came back into the room, followed by the nurse. 6 months later, I'm walking again. The doctors say I might be able to drive again soon. My wife got a job that pays the bills and puts food on the table. I'm looking forward to working again and helping out. I'll never drive a truck again. I'll never drive on that stretch of road again. I find myself questioning if it was real or not. Was there really a demonic creature bent on dining on my entrails? Or did I just hit a deer and stumble into traffic? I don't know. My mind seems to be trying to protect me the same way I was protecting Angeline. Angeline hasn't had any nightmares recently, and neither have I. Honestly, I hope I never have another dream. It isn't worth the risk of seeing that thing ever again. There's something out there, something that followed me back from the woods, something my grandfather warned me about when I was a kid, something that's haunted my family for generations. You're probably thinking it's some ghost story, some overblown tale from the hills. I thought the same thing, but I swear to God, it's real. I was 14 the first time Grandpa Samuel told me about it. The woods, the hunger, the thing that stalks you. Before that night, I thought he was just another old man full of stories, spinning yarns around the fire to keep us entertained. Grandpa had a way of talking about the old days, about the good old times. But that night, this night, it wasn't like that. It was winter. The snow was falling thick and heavy outside, and the wind howled like a pack of wolves. I was sitting across from him, staring into the crackling fire. My breath made the air feel cold, even though we were safe inside his cabin. He was different tonight. I could feel it. Something about the way he looked at the flames, the way his hands trembled around his cane. I could tell he wanted to say something, but he didn't know how. Finally, after what felt like hours of silence, Grandpa broke it. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Sammy, you ever hear the name Darryl?" The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Darryl, my Uncle Darryl, the one who disappeared before I was born. Nobody ever talked about him, not in any real way. It was one of those family things you learn to avoid bringing up at the dinner table. Darryl was just gone. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual, even though my heart had started racing. "He went missing, right?" Grandpa didn't answer right away. Instead, he just stared into the fire, his eyes hollow, distant. "He didn't just go missing, Sammy. He changed." I swallowed. There was a pit in my stomach now, deep and cold. Grandpa was never this serious. He finally met my eyes, and the look was enough to stop my heart. "Your Uncle Darryl," he said. "He went out trapping in the mountains one winter. A storm came through, worst I've ever seen. They were stuck up there, trapped by the snow. Food ran out. They had nothing left. And that's when Darryl made the choice." I felt my pulse quicken. "What choice?" I asked. Grandpa's voice dropped lower, like he was trying to say something he knew I wouldn't want to hear. "He killed his partner," he said quietly. "Ate him." I sat there frozen. My stomach turned. "What?" I asked, almost as a reflex. "Grandpa, what are you?" But Grandpa's face didn't shift. His gaze stayed locked on me, and there was something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. A kind of terror, a warning. "Darryl killed his partner," he repeated, his voice soft but unwavering. "And when he tasted him, when he got that hunger inside him, Sammy, it didn't stop. It never went away." I couldn't breathe. My hands gripped the armrests of the chair I was sitting in, knuckles white. "He ate him? You're serious?" Grandpa nodded, but there was no humor in his eyes. "Sammy, after that, Darryl didn't come back the same. It wasn't just the hunger for food. It was something else. Something darker. That hunger didn't just stay in his belly. It stayed in him." The wind outside howled louder, rattling the windows, and for a second, I thought I could hear something moving out there. But Grandpa's voice held me in place, his words sinking into my bones. "Darryl would disappear," Grandpa continued, his voice barely above a whisper now. "Months at a time, he'd go into the hills, into the woods, and people thought he was just, I don't know, lost or on some crazy bender. But that wasn't it. It wasn't alcohol or drugs. It was something darker, something he couldn't control." I felt my heart pounding in my chest. The fire seemed to flicker, casting long, menacing shadows across the room. I could feel my skin prickling with unease. "Grandpa, what are you saying?" I asked, barely able to speak. "People," he said. "He'd hunted people. That hunger, It turned him into something else. He wasn't human anymore. Not in the way you think. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, watching Grandpa, my throat tight, my thoughts spinning. Daryl, my own flesh and blood, had become something monstrous. But Grandpa's eyes told me more than words ever could. He wasn't just telling me a ghost story. He was telling me the truth. And you, Grandpa said, his voice thick with sorrow. You need to know, Sammy, if you ever feel that pull, that hunger, you need to walk away. Don't follow it. Don't go near those woods, because once it gets inside you, once that hunger takes hold, there's no going back. I didn't speak. What could I say? The fire crackled between us, but the warmth of it didn't reach me anymore. I felt cold, colder than the snowstorm outside. I wanted to ask more, but something told me there was nothing more to ask. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, his face pale, like the weight of the world was resting on his shoulders. Grandpa, what happened to Daryl? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Grandpa didn't answer for a long time. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes dark. He disappeared, he said quietly. He never came back, and I didn't. I couldn't go after him, not after what I saw, not after what he became. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, a chill running down my spine. Grandpa didn't say another word about it. He just went back to staring into the fire, his hands trembling on his cane. The next few weeks were strange. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. Grandpa's warning echoed in my mind every time I walked outside, every time I found myself near the woods. I kept seeing flashes of Daryl's face, with hollow, empty eyes, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was just a warning, or if I was destined to fall into the same trap. It wasn't long before I started hearing the whispers. At first, I thought it was just the locals, their stories spinning out of control, just another ghost story to tell the kids. But there was something about the way they talked about the woods. They said the trees were alive with something dark. They said the air smelled different there, like the scent of something rotting. They said if you went too deep into those hills, you wouldn't come back. I didn't want to believe it, but one Saturday afternoon, a few weeks after Grandpa's warning, I went hiking with a couple of friends, thinking maybe I could laugh it all off. Maybe I'd find nothing but an old campfire and some abandoned traps. But the woods, they weren't the same. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing in on me. The trees were too close, their branches twisted like gnarled fingers reaching for us. We found a campfire site deep in the woods. It was old, overgrown, with broken twigs scattered around, and animal bones lying in the dirt. The remnants of a fire pit sat in the middle, but the smell in the air was wrong. It wasn't just the smell of burnt wood. It was something rancid. I tried to laugh it off, but my friends were already looking uneasy. None of us wanted to stay long. Something was watching us. I could feel it, a cold presence creeping at the edge of my vision. We made our way back down the mountain quickly, our pace quickening as the trees seemed to close in on us. But when we finally got back to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone, the feeling that something, someone, was following us. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The woods, the hunger, what Grandpa had told me. I couldn't get it out of my mind, and against every instinct I had, I decided to go back, alone. I didn't tell anyone. I knew they would try to stop me, but I had to see it for myself. I had to know what was out there. So, a few days later, I returned. I knew I shouldn't have gone back, but part of me couldn't stop. The stories, the warning my grandfather gave me, the whispers from the townsfolk had burrowed into my bones. It was like something deep inside of me wanted to go, like the hunger Grandpa talked about had already sunk its claws into me. I didn't understand it at first, but I did now. I'd been planning the hike for days. I told myself I was just curious, that I was trying to understand what Grandpa meant. I could feel the pull of the mountains, the same feeling I had when I was younger and would listen to Grandpa's stories. The hills had always been an enigma to me, mysterious, wild, and untamed. But now they felt darker, dangerous. I didn't tell anyone. If I told Mom or Dad, they would have stopped me. They would have said it was crazy, but I couldn't shake the idea of the clearing. The name Darryl wouldn't leave my mind. I had to see it for myself. The morning I left was clear, the sun hidden behind a blanket of gray clouds, but no snow yet. It was deceptively calm. I packed a light bag, brought my coat and a thermos of coffee. There was no way I was going far, not without seeing what was really out there. By the time I made it to the woods, the clouds had thickened, and the chill in the air had settled deep into my bones. The path that led into the hills was narrow and overgrown, the underbrush dense with tangled vines and dead leaves. I had to push through the brush to get through. The first hour was nothing out of the ordinary. The air was still, too still. It felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, and the crunch of my boots on the snow sounded louder than it should have. But it wasn't until I got deeper into the woods that I noticed something off. The temperature seemed to drop. The air, already cold, now carried a biting chill that cut through my jacket. And the trees, they were different here. They weren't like the ones I'd seen earlier, tall and proud. These were twisted, crooked. I felt like I was being watched, not by animals, but by something more intelligent. I kept walking though, my heart hammered in my chest, and every instinct screamed at me to turn around, but I kept pushing forward. I needed to know what lay ahead. It was when I reached the clearing that the feeling intensified. I felt for sure something old and hungry was watching me. The clearing itself was strange, like the trees bowed inward, protecting whatever secret was hidden in the center. I don't know why I felt that way, but I did. It had the feel of a place where something terrible had happened. I stood there for a while, breathing heavily, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air, my gut twisted. It felt like I was being pulled toward the center of the clearing, like there was something I had to see. I didn't know why, but my feet moved on their own. That's when I saw it. A figure. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but no. There was definitely someone standing in the clearing, tall, thin, their back to me, their head tilted oddly, like they were listening to the wind. The figure was unnaturally still, unnervingly so. The first thought that crossed my mind was that it wasn't a person at all. I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. I couldn't move. I didn't want to. But I couldn't look away either. My body was rooted to the spot, as if the woods themselves were holding me there. Then, slowly, the figure turned, and I saw his face. It wasn't the way his features looked, hollowed out, gaunt, like someone who'd been starved for weeks. It was the emptiness in his eyes, black, like two pits that went on forever. I couldn't explain it, but it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. And as he stared at me, something inside me screamed. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. Darryl, I whispered, the name slipping out before I could stop it. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but I could hear it. as though the wind itself was carrying the words, "Come to me." I felt it then, the hunger. It wasn't a feeling you could describe. It wasn't something you could put into words. It was deep inside me, gnawing at my insides, a ravenous, primal craving. It twisted in my stomach, a desperate, insatiable need. It wanted me to follow. It wanted me to take the first step toward it, and I couldn't resist. My legs moved on their own, bringing me closer, step by step, despite every instinct telling me to run. My heart thudded in my chest, my breath shallow. I was terrified, but I didn't stop. The hunger was louder now, like a growl inside my head, urging me to move faster. My head swam with dizziness, the world tilting like I was caught in a dream. The closer I got, the cleaner the figure became. His skin was pale, too pale, stretched tight over his bones, and the smell, I can't describe it. It wasn't the smell of decay, but something worse, something that shouldn't exist. I was almost there, and then, without warning, the figure lunged at me. I barely had time to react before it was on me, grabbing me with cold, bony hands, pulling me toward him. I fought, but it felt like my strength was slipping away, like I was drowning in the hunger that pressed in on all sides. But just as I thought I was done for, something broke through the fog in my mind. Grandpa's voice, his warning. I remembered what he'd said. Once it has you, there's no turning back. I twisted, desperate, and somehow broke free from his grip, stumbling backward. My breath came in ragged gasps. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure, Daryl, stood there, watching me with those empty, black eyes. "You'll come back," he whispered, his voice a rasp. "They always do." I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I made it out of the woods, barely. But the hunger, God, the hunger, it stayed with me. The next few days were a blur. I didn't talk to anyone. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daryl's face, his eyes, that hunger in them. It was like something inside me had cracked open, and I couldn't close it again. The pull, it was there, always there. It gnawed at me, clawed at me, like something was whispering in my ear, urging me to go back to the woods, to find the clearing again. I knew what Grandpa meant now. I understood. It wasn't just a monster. It wasn't just a ghost. Something that could take root in anyone, that could make them crave more than food, more than anything. That's when I realized it wasn't over. The hunger follows, always, and it's patient. It's been a week since I made it out of those woods. I haven't been able to sleep for more than an hour without waking up drenched in sweat. It's not just the fear, though. That's part of it, sure, but it's the hunger. It gnaws at me from the inside, that pull towards the woods, that need to go back. It started slow at first, a whisper in the back of my mind, like a bad thought, a stray idea that shouldn't exist. But now it's loud. It's constant. It calls to me, louder with each passing day. I try to stay busy. I try to ignore it. But no matter how hard you try, it's there, pressing down on you, making everything feel heavy and wrong. I think the worst part is that I know exactly what it is. I know it's the same thing that Grandpa warned me about. The hunger, it's real. It's not something I can outrun, no matter how far I go. I've started noticing little things, things that should be normal, but now they aren't. The way the trees move when I walk by them, bending as if they're leaning toward me, watching me. The way the wind shifts, like it's trying to tell me something I can't quite hear. Even in my own house, I feel it. It doesn't go away. It never leaves. I thought I could shake it off. I thought maybe I could outrun it. But no matter where I go, there's still the feeling like I'm being pulled back, like there's a force I can't fight. I think it's the woods. I think it's the hunger. I didn't want to tell anyone, but my mom, she could tell something was wrong. She's always been good at that, sensing when something's off with me, and I couldn't lie to her, not when she looked at me like she knew there was something wrong in my eyes. "Sammy," she said one evening, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "What happened? You've been distant. This isn't like you." I stared down at my hands, the words tangled in my throat. How do you explain something like this? How do you tell your mom that the hunger inside you won't let go? That it's not just in your mind, but in your soul? How do you tell her that something's out there, waiting for you to fall into its grip, to follow it? But then she said something that made me freeze. "I know what you're feeling." I looked up at her. My heart thudded in my chest. "What do you mean?" Her eyes were wide with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe. Or maybe something else. Something deeper. "I know what Grandpa tried to warn you about," she said, her voice low. "It's been in our family for generations, Sammy. Your grandfather tried to stop it, but it was already too late by the time he realized what it was. He tried to protect you from it. He thought you wouldn't be touched, but..." Her voice trailed off, and she stared at her hands like she was ashamed of something. I felt my heart sink. "What are you talking about?" She took a deep breath, her eyes distant, like she was seeing something far away. "The hunger, Sammy. It's in our blood. It follows us, and once it has you, it won't let you go." I was silent. The words didn't seem real. It was like hearing a nightmare spoken aloud. I wanted to scream, to ask her if she was serious, but I didn't. I couldn't. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. She shook her head slowly. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want to believe it either. But it's true. You felt it, haven't you? That need to go back. That pull." I couldn't lie. I nodded slowly. It's been getting worse. Every day, it feels like it's eating me from the inside." Mom looked at me with sad eyes. "It's the same thing that happened to your Uncle Darryl. He wasn't the first. He won't be the last." My stomach twisted into a knot. "You knew about him, about what happened?" She nodded. "I never wanted you to know. I didn't want to scare you. But Sammy, this is something we can't outrun. The hunger, it's in us. It's been passed down generation after generation. Your grandfather thought he could protect you from it, keep you safe, but..." She stopped herself. Her gaze turned toward the window, like she was seeing something I couldn't. "It's been in the blood since the beginning," she said quietly. "Since the time of the first settlers. It's a curse, and it follows us through the mountains, through the woods. It waits for the right moment to take hold." I sat there, dumbfounded. My mind spun, trying to process everything she just told me. The hunger was real. It was something my family had been battling for generations, and it was in me now, too. I could feel it, deep in my gut, clawing its way through me, pulling me towards the woods, toward the clearing where Darryl had become lost to it. "Mom," I said, my voice shaky, "what do we do? How do we stop it?" She shook her head again, her eyes filled with sorrow. "There's nothing we can do. Once it's inside you, it never leaves." All we can do is try to keep it at bay. Your grandfather tried, but it always comes back. Her words hit me like a weight, suffocating me. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. There had to be a way out. There had to be something we could do. But even as I thought it, I knew the answer. I knew deep down that there was no escaping it. The hunger would follow me, no matter where I went. The next day, I went to the woods again. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought I could fight it. Maybe I thought that I could prove to myself that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't going to fall like Daryl did. But the moment I stepped into those woods, I knew I was already lost. The cold hit me first. It felt like a slap to the face, sharp and biting. But it wasn't the cold that made me freeze. It was the pull, the familiar hunger, gnawing at my insides, urging me to go deeper into the forest. Something was waiting for me in those trees, the same thing that had taken Daryl and other members of my family. I was drawn deeper into the woods, the path narrowing, the trees pressing in on me. The hunger urged me on, and then I saw him. He was standing there again in the clearing. Daryl. His eyes were empty like before, but this time something was different. There was no need for words. I could hear his voice in my head. Come to me. The voice echoed in my head, low and guttural, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I wasn't afraid anymore. The hunger had made sure of that. I had become part of it, just like Daryl had. I could feel it pulling me forward, making the world around me blur as everything centered on the figure in front of me. And then, just as I was about to step into the clearing, I heard a voice. "Sammy, stop." The voice was rough yet firm, unmistakable in its tone. I froze mid-step, my heart slamming against my ribcage. My body trembled, fighting the hunger that pushed me forward. "Grandpa." "Sammy, listen to me." Grandpa's voice was clearer now, stronger, and I could hear the urgency in it. "You have to fight it. You have to fight the hunger." I spun around, my heart racing, and there he was, standing at the edge of the clearing, his cane gripped tightly in his hand. His old face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. "I can't," I said. "You can," he replied, his voice steady but full of pain. "The hunger, it doesn't just take you physically. It takes you in here." He pointed to his chest, then his head. "You can fight it. You must. I won't let it have you too." I felt the ground beneath me shift, the hunger inside me clawing at my insides, demanding that I go to Daryl. But Grandpa's voice, his presence, held me steady. I wanted to go. I wanted to be consumed, to end it all. But Grandpa's words grounded me. "The hunger's been in our blood for generations," Grandpa continued, his voice cracking with emotion. "I thought I could run from it, thought I could keep you safe, keep it from taking you like it took Daryl. But it's too late, Sammy. It's inside you now." I closed my eyes, fighting the wave of panic that rushed through me. The hunger felt like a physical thing now, something wrapped around my chest, choking the air out of me. I wanted to scream, to run, to give in, but Grandpa's voice was a tether, pulling me back from the edge. "You don't have to do this," Grandpa said, stepping forward, his hands reaching toward me. I made the mistake of thinking I could outrun it, that I could hide from it. But the truth is, Sammy, we're never free of it. We can't outrun the hunger, but we can fight it. We can fight together. His words hit me like a sudden wave of cold water splashing me awake. Fight. That was all we had left. It wasn't about outrunning the hunger, about trying to make it go away. It was about fighting it, holding on to whatever humanity we had left. Grandpa had spent his life fighting it, running from it, and now he was here, fighting for me. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to listen to him. I had to fight. "I'm sorry," Grandpa whispered, his voice full of regret. "I should have never left you alone to face it." "You didn't," I whispered back. I took a shaky step backward, away from Daryl's outstretched arms. The hunger inside me screeched, desperate, but I didn't take another step forward. Grandpa was here. He was the anchor I needed. "Don't let it take you, Sammy," Grandpa said, his voice full of urgency. "The hunger will follow you, no matter where you go, but you can fight it. You don't have to give in." I could feel the air thickening around me, suffocating me, but I could also feel Grandpa's presence, grounding me, keeping me from falling into the abyss. "You have to fight," he repeated, his voice firm, unwavering. And for the first time since I'd stepped into these woods, I felt something inside me shift. The hunger, that gnawing, ravenous thing, still clawed at me. But it wasn't everything. It wasn't my only thought. I could fight it. I could choose not to give in. The figure of Daryl behind me was still there, but I no longer felt powerless. I didn't have to succumb. I took another step back, then another. Slowly, carefully, as if testing the strength of my decision. The hunger inside me shrieked, but it wasn't enough to make me turn around. Grandpa's presence was a shield, blocking it out, pushing me back toward my humanity. "Come on, Sammy," Grandpa urged, his voice gentle but firm. "Come back to me." With a final burst of strength, I turned away from the clearing, from Daryl, and began to walk back toward Grandpa. The hunger screamed inside me, but it was fading, replaced by hope. I didn't know what would happen after this. I didn't know if the hunger would ever stop, if I could ever fully escape it. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Grandpa was with me, and that was enough to give me the strength to fight. We walked out of the woods together, step by careful step, and though the hunger still tugged at me from the shadows, I knew one thing: as long as Grandpa was there, I wouldn't have to face it alone. 5 years have passed since that night in the woods. Grandpa Samuel is gone now, his chair by the fire empty, his cane resting quietly in the corner. I still think about him, about his voice, his warnings, the way he pulled me back from the edge. I've learned how to live with the hunger, and I've learned more about my family, more than I ever wanted to know. Before he passed, he shared everything he knew with me. He has been researching the hunger for decades, even before Daryl changed. It turned out that my mom knew a fair bit too, and since then, I've been digging through old journals, letters, and even town records, anything I could find that might tell me what happened to the ancestors that Grandpa warned me about, the ones who disappeared or those who came back wrong. What I've uncovered has chilled me to my core, but it reminds me why I fight. It turns out, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, hell, even distant cousins, who I thought had normal lives, knew it was there. They knew the hunger was real. It passed down through generations, like a dark inheritance. Some of them ran from it, some of them tried to fight it, and a few, they gave in. There's a pattern, but I'm still trying to figure it out. I think about it every day, and now, after 5 years of searching, of uncovering truths that shed light on this horrendous curse, I've made a decision. I'm not going to let it claim me. I'm not going to let it have my children, or anyone else in this town for that matter. I don't know how I'll fight it. or if I even can. But to this day, I am fighting it. Before Grandpa passed, he said that he didn't think that there was any humanity left in Daryl, and he probably has an insatiable need for human flesh. Every day I remind myself that I cannot give myself over to that. I just hope, as my body and mind get older, I can find the strength to fight it. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have a scary story you'd like me to read on the channel, please send me an email or post it to my subreddit. You can find details of this in the video description. It's the stories that make this, and this is the best way to ensure variety in the stories I share. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my channel members and patrons who now have special access to ad-free videos and other behind-the-scenes content. Once again, thank you guys for listening. Have a great night.